Freedom. Freedom? Yes, that is the title we have given to this particular series of reflections. And it reminds us that although we're all wanting to live in total freedom, we may not be very sure of what that freedom is going to cost us, or really what it is. So during the series, we have been taking some of the most important challenges that we are facing today as a human family on this planet. Taking them one by one and looking at different aspects of that challenge. And the one we have for today, number 7 in the series, is one I have perhaps been avoiding introducing with you. Partly because it is so vast a topic. It has so many implications. It is also perhaps the most dangerous and most destructive aspects of our life together on the planet. Freedom from this. The title of today's talk, reflection, is simply, in an age of the gross devaluing of human sexuality, can we develop the passion we need to be fully human? Many ways in which we can experience this challenge, and every single human being is involved simply by being human. It requires, therefore, very deep and honest reflection, and for that we're changing our methodology a little today. Instead of having the points we want to reflect on, first of all, and then going away to make the reflection later, we're going to have one small aspect of the topic and then pause for a little reflection. We'll do that with every single aspect, so you can take it away and spend much longer on any one particular aspect that you think you need to spend time with. So that is a slightly different methodology for today because of the theme. The magnitude of the destructiveness and the destructive effects of devaluing our capacity for human sexual interaction over centuries is something that has been hidden under a sort of climate, culture of silence. Now, perhaps with the coming of social media, the silence has been broken, and we're becoming more and more aware of the destructive effects on our humanity and on our freedom that have been with us for centuries. We now realize we need a total reversal of this attitude and the behavior that goes with it. And as every single human being is involved, not one of us can avoid our personal responsibility for helping to bring that reversal about. So here we go with this particular challenge to us all today. let's begin by just having a quick look at in our contemporary situation and some of the many ways in which we recognize the destruction of our dignity, our sexual dignity as human beings. First of all, let's take the children. How often do we hear of the sexual abuse of young children within the family? From authority figures, politicians, head teachers, clergy of the different religions. We get the stories of terrorists who feel that they have the right to kidnap large numbers of children, take them with them for abuse, one way or another. We have the whole question of pornography, which has been developed and expanded through the use of television, but more so through personal computers. Have we really stopped to think about that? We also have the mutilation, the sexual mutilation of girls and young women in certain cultures. Even though organizations like the United Nations are doing their best to counteract this. It has been going on for centuries. The sex slave industry, yes, an industry of bringing young women from their homes and their protection to where they are promised an easier, more comfortable, more economically satisfying life, one or more personal opportunities for development. Well, in actual fact, they become slaves to an industry that buys and sells women for sex. None of these things are new to you. You see them almost every day in our media reports and in our television. The coverage of these ways of degrading human beings, all of us, not just the children or the women, but the whole human family, is constantly being degraded, devalued, vulgarized in this way. It happens also in, we would say, legal partnerships, in marriage, so often, with the boss at work, who can demand not just that the physical work is done by his employees, but that the women are there for his fun, his enjoyment, his entertainment, so on, and so on, and so on. Rape covered up by the politicians, by the successful entertainers, musicians and artists. This is just moving over the surface of the situation as we are beginning to see it now. Of course it has existed, as I said, for centuries, in different ways. But now we cannot avoid facing our responsibility for this. what is really the root cause of this abuse? Basically, the acceptance of the inequality of the male and female of the species. Men and women are not equally important, valuable. Where did that come from? It was built into many traditions, and quite often was built into the tradition through religious traditions, religious structures and organizations. And this, of course, is in all cultures. It's not just in the one I'm going to mention now, but we can see it quite clearly in the Judaic, Christian, Islamic tradition. And we have to only just go back to our familiar Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. If you don't remember this, go back and read the beginning of the first book of the Old Testament, Genesis. Go back and read it again. And there you will find that there are two versions given of the creation of human beings. In the first one, God created the male of the species. He made man. And then looked at poor man who might be lonely, who needed a companion or somebody to entertain him or work for him. And so he took a bit of man's body, a bit of his ribs, and created a woman. Woman was just a bit of man there for man's use. Companionship, pleasure. The second version in Genesis is quite simple. It states, "And God made them man and woman. Man and woman, he created them." Full stop. So there they were, equal from the beginning. Now, probably libraries of books, theological books, have been written over sections of the book of Genesis. This is not only the only choice between two options which Genesis gives us, but it's quite clear to us that the main version that was accepted and promulgated was the first one. That God made man, and woman was an afterthought and didn't have a value of her own. Now we know how that has seeped into our cultures over centuries and centuries and centuries. Aha. Perhaps if we look beyond the creation stories in Genesis, read a little further, we might be surprised to find that in Catholic Christianity, right into the 10th century, there was a certain uncertainty as to whether women would ever reach heaven. Heaven was really meant for men. We have a little bit of a shadow of this thinking in Islam, where you have the idea that heaven was where the man could enjoy a whole harem of women to be at his disposal for whatever he wanted. Okay. The inequality between men and women right back to creation. And in the Jewish family, the father was almighty. He chose whom his daughters would marry, what career or work his sons would do. The almighty Jewish father made God the almighty father. We need to look at this, where the roots were, and why they took root in us. Because then we're learning something more about ourselves. Now, are we already beginning to redress the imbalance between male and female in our thinking? Certainly in certain professions and work situations, and even in politics to a less extent, we're beginning to be conscious of the fact that women did not have an equal opportunity for promotion, for recognition, for development of their skills and capacities. Yes, it is being redressed, but minimally, if you look at the statistics that are produced, the number of women who are elected into parliament and so on and so on. We have plenty of statistics to look at. Being redressed. The interesting thing is that we're finding new aspects of this problem, or ways of counteracting this problem, which could in actual fact become problems themselves. What perhaps am I thinking of? The new aspects of the challenge that has come from the new emphasis on transgender. Now, where has this come from and why? Remember, we're not finding the answers here. We're not giving the answers during these reflections. We're standing back and looking more deeply and honestly into the situation as I understand it and as I am responding to it. Transgender. Once totally taboo. Nobody spoke about it, nobody referred to it, and now, but just one unexpected aspect of this new situation that you might have noticed in the news concerns India. In India, every 4 years, there is what is called a Kumbh Mela. It's a huge gathering of thousands and tens and thousands of people who have a religious, spiritual bent in life. And they go to one of the 4 cities which are traditionally designated for these great celebrations of spirituality. This year in the Kumbh Mela in India, one of the whole sections and processions of gurus announced that all the gurus were transsexual. And therefore their devotees. It would be interesting just to look at that. It seems such an extreme example for most of us. But what lies behind it is an attitude that is coming into our ordinary everyday life all over the world. Transgender gurus. Of the roots of this phenomenon in the fact that in the 1970s, when people were throwing over the traditional religions, particularly in Europe and the New World in America, and trying to find answers to their questions in the Eastern traditions, that they expected the Eastern gurus, the spiritual gurus of India, for example, to have the answers to the future. Well, it's an interesting thought. There's much to explore here. What are the roots of this particular phenomena that we're dealing with now? And then there is the question of now the more popular use of hormones to bring about a sex change. It's been popularized by some of our more famous entertainers around the world, but now we find it in ordinary everyday life with ordinary everyday family situations, the ones we would recognize around ourselves. I met last year a mother, distressed, great tears of anguish, because her 18-year-old daughter had announced that she was already involved in getting help for sex change through the use of hormones. And her reason to her sorrowing parents was, "I don't want to grow up a woman like you," to her mother. Or another mother I met, also in tears, because her 8-year-old daughter had come home from school with the same question, or similar question: "Would you and Papa allow me to become a boy?" And when her mother, completely stunned by this question, for which she had no preparation, asked why her daughter was asking this, she announced, well, her daughter's best friend, also 8 years old, had inquired this of her parents, and her parents had been very enthusiastic and said they would help her. Well, it's here. It's not just in the newspapers. Another aspect of this new challenge is the fact that we have now succeeded in modifying the DNA of an embryo. In fact, we've had twins who were modified in embryo to remove the possibility of them developing HIV. This was successful, and further research is going on. It's interesting that the one thing that our scientists decided needed to be recognized and cut out, the gene responsible for HIV, therefore was also sex-related. Okay. Where is this research leading us? Where could it lead us? To other modifications of the human being? If we go back to our original wisdom, we'll see more clearly the value of our human sexuality. Made as male and female, purposefully, but with the clear understanding that our sexuality belongs to our very temporary reality, our body, psyche, personhood. We came in to this human life, we will live through it, and it will end. We were born, we live, and we will die. Our personality, our intelligence, our sexuality, all belongs to this very temporary physical existence. Our original wisdom was quite clear that we are not just a body, psyche, person for 100 years on planet Earth. That's a very temporary reality. What we really are is a self, spirit, part of the source of all that is also spirit. And spirit is neither male nor female. And spirit doesn't need a body, psyche. Spirit is. If you look through the different traditions and look in the scriptures and the teaching, you'll find affirmation of this. I've mentioned the Vedic teaching, our original wisdom. But as I mentioned the Judeo-Christian tradition earlier, go back into the Christian tradition of the New Testament. The disciples asked Jesus, the old trick, a woman married, her husband died, so she married again, and she managed to get rid of 7 of her husbands before she died. And the question was, now, after this life, whose wife is she? And almost with a sigh of resignation at their stupidity, Jesus had to say to them, look, life after life is not this physical life. There is no male and female. That only belongs to the body, psyche, person that's here for a short time. Yours pure spirit. Spirit is not male or female, that belongs to the body and the psyche. Now you'll find this tested over and over again. We need to go back to the wisdom in all of our traditions that remind us that we are pure spirit. We use the body psyche with great respect and gratitude while we're walking on planet Earth. But it is not our total reality. We need to take some time to think deeply, honestly, seriously about our own understanding of this. Do I realize that I am more than my body psyche? That I am spirit? The mystery, part of the mystery that has brought everything into creation, and for which we have had many names. God by a dozen different names that each one of us knows. Wisdom. We need to recover the wisdom that we have as human beings. The wisdom that comes with experiencing ourselves as more than just body, psyche. And when we get in touch again with the incredible wonder that every single human being is, value that we cannot even imagine, we may get back to saying, well, while I have a body psyche on this journey, what I need is great respect, deep joy and appreciation in all the gifts I have, including that of my capacity for relating male, female, relating deeply, honestly, physically, sexually. Because when we meet ourselves as spirit, we know that what we have been given is the experience of God's passion. And this was used in the original wisdom. It replaces the more ineffective word love as it's become. The passion is love, yes. It's the total giving to the other without any ego, self getting in the way. That is the passion we should have for the freedom to be fully human.